He's doing deals. He's not thinking, you know.
with his cap on. It's like a boy racer at Tesco car park.
And just that optimistic lens that can cause you a lot of grief if you're not careful.
Whoopsie, we didn't hit our housing target. You know, why do they necessarily at this certain point in care?
And it's funny, the longer you're in property development, the more the shiny penny wears off.
Being late for my Christmas party to be here with you gentlemen and for the audience, so...
You're such a good man. Look at him,
Yeah.
commitment. Have you actually got a Christmas party now that you're missing?
Yeah, they're all currently at the venue, waiting by the door, constantly looking for the window to see if I'm going to turn up.
It's
Ground up sound. Ooh, yeah. Real estate deals. We lay them down. Let's get those deals. Deals. Deals making money, baby.
Welcome back, viewers of the Ground Up podcast. This is episode 35. Now, you may have noticed in some of the previous episodes, I might have fucked up the titles a little bit. So there'll be episodes that sound like they're the wrong way around. That's my fault because I titled the files wrong and then Sean uploaded them in a different order. So if you notice that episode 34 was 33, then that is why. But anyway, we're here, episode 35, and today we are going to be talking a few market updates, some changes to government and the Reform Party with the backing of Nick Candy, which is interesting, big property mogul developer. Then we're going to talk about some of the planning changes. They've made a lot of announcements, so it's worth hitting on that stuff. But then we're just going to go through and talk about the consequences of being naive in property development, because there's been so many stories over the last few years, just because of the market flushing out people who've made bad decisions, that we thought it would be good to cover ground on just the mistakes that you're likely to make when you're starting out in property development, or even if you're ahead in the journey, and just that optimistic lens that can cause you a lot of grief if you're not careful. So, and then we'll tangent and go on a bit of a roller coaster from there. Now, we did, FYI, this morning actually got up. Well, some of us got up at 7:30, myself and Stu, on at 7:30, and we're like, "Where's Jack and Dee?"
Mate.
So Jack had a night out, and he was going on a bender, and he woke up a little bit later than planned. And Dorian, bless him, his kid had a sickness that I've got as well. There's colds going all around the country, so he was up all night. So it ended up being a shit show of a podcast. We had a good laugh, but we didn't actually record. So we're doing it now, but Stuart's away for the day. So it's not Stuart's fault for not being here. If anything, I'll blame Jack. Fuck it.
I was actually on. I was ready to rumble.
He was on, to be fair.
I was being a good host. I had loads of people staying over.
And I'm actually being late for my Christmas party to be here with you gentlemen and for the audience, so...
You're such a good man. Look at him,
Yeah.
commitment. Have you actually got a Christmas party now that you're missing?
Yeah, they're all currently at the venue, waiting by the door, constantly looking for the window to see if I'm going to turn up.
Dorian, do you find it funny? I actually turned up late to my Christmas party yesterday, and you have to go because they have to pay. It's like, they technically can't.
Technically, if you just say you're going to turn up, and then they've all had a whale of a time, and then you don't turn up, who is going to pay?
Split this.
Very good point. I'll note that in mind next week for our Christmas party. Fucking sweet.
You're going to get the guitar out and play the song, right?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
They have to pay for that, do they?
Ryan Bublé.
Right.
Look, if we do live events one day for whatever reason, I'll consider singing, but you guys are doing something as well. Like
I'll play the piano.
That's a good point. Actually,
I can play the drums.
All right, let's fucking get the band back together. Fuck it.
Yeah.
Still on ad libs. It'll be.
We get one of those shiny gold records with our name on it.
One of them.
The background. Yeah.
All right, so let's dive into this pod quick and get the topics out of the way, just because it's good information for our viewers and listeners, but a bit boring if we hang around too long on planning. But what's not so boring is Nick Candy. Now, I know of Nick Candy and have seen the developments he's done, but are either of you two more well-versed on Nick Candy's background, the developments he's done, like One Hyde Park and stuff like that?
I've done some research, yeah, because obviously over the years I've researched the Candy Brothers, how they got started, we talked about them before on the podcast as well, really, but it's yeah.
Can you do a quick lowdown on Nick Candy then, just because I want to explain how important it is that Nick's now supporting Nigel Farage for reform?
Yeah, sure. I don't have any notes together with me, but from my recollection, him and his brother, they started off with a loan. I think it was from their nan, and they started off doing property renovations in London, where they converted like one bed into two bed apartments and selling them on and stuff like that. And that's what got them going, and they started making money from it. And then very quickly, with their ambition, they got into much bigger things and secured backing with I think it was Middle East investors to do one of the most prestigious developments across London, which is like One Hyde Park. And I can't. I don't know if it's Nick or his brother that owned the penthouse there, or he still does.
Nick.
Do you know?
was
It is
Nick.
Nick, isn't it? Yeah. So I think it's like one of the most expensive apartments in
350 million he's trying to sell it for.
nuts. Yeah. So, and basically, ultimately, they are just big time ballsy developers in the center, and they've really made a big name for themselves. And are they officially billionaires?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
so Nick's worth, I think it's 800 mil, but their business, the Candy Brothers business, is valued at 2 billion.
Billion, yeah.
He actually also did he bid and actually successfully buy Chelsea Football Club, or in 2022 he tried to buy Chelsea Football Club for 2.5 bill.
Is it?
Yeah.
Mad. I mean, that's the point here. Really, is just to understand who. What's really weird about this, and I'm not tooting my own horn here, but me and Robbie have been following the American politics. Obviously, the Doge thing being the most exciting thing, where Elon and Vivek Ramaswamy and a cohort of others are going into government to strip it of its
You
inefficiencies.
would definitely love American politics right now, Ryan. Yeah, 100%. You'd be.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
could just imagine you with your
I
red,
love
white, and blue flag out
Let's
in
go,
the.
baby. Let's go, baby. Texas,
Make
baby.
America great again.
That is me, mate, all over. But we've been following that and then looking at the stark contrast of the government and just not even Labour, just the Tories were just as bad. Like just the government being this big inefficient blob and this mess that we as property developers are at the coalface of because of the bureaucracy and the latent defects that come from dealing with councils, regulators, all that bullshit. So we're like even more stressed about how inefficient our government is. And to see Nick Candy come into and publicly back Nigel Farage on Sky News. I can't remember the name of the reporter. I forget her name, but she does all the big political interviews. She's quite annoying to listen to. And Nick Candy in this interview says he's on the phone with Elon literally that morning, and they're already talking about how they're going to raise funds for reform, professionalize the party, get it rocking, and do the same thing that they're doing with Doge to the British government. And I'm just like, halle fucking lulia. If they can get this done, it will be amazing. But how cool it is that Nick Candy is one of the guys who's now becoming one of the catalytic changes for private sector endorsing reform in the way they are. So, and look, not to get political on this podcast, but everyone probably knows by this point that I cannot stand Labour and the Tories, and I'm well excited about reform and what Nigel's bringing to the table. But obviously, everyone's got their opinions out there. Some people may not like this news, fair dues, but it's all about making government more efficient. So hopefully an exciting thing that will evolve over next year as Elon starts to step into British politics. And then separate news going to the American side, just thought this was interesting because obviously the Trump family are property people. That's how they've got all their wealth. I tried to find stats. Yeah, I was going to do a little quiz with you guys on Trump family wealth and their biggest buildings and stuff like that. I went on Google, and ChatGPT to try and find information, and all I could find was negative stories about Trump and about how he screwed people over in the past and stuff like that. And I was like, why is there no? I just want stats. I just want like how much his property empire is and things like that. So I couldn't actually find like useful answers, but they're in the billions, obviously, with properties under management spanning across the globe, from golf courses to casinos and big tower blocks. Trump Tower. They got one on some other street in New York. Loads of big shit. And then
Vegas.
you got
They got
Vegas,
Vegas.
and then you got Eric Trump on this talking thing here that you could go to find on X on Bitcoin Magazine, and he's outwardly talking about how, on balance, Bitcoin is a much better asset than property, which I found interesting, and the way he talks about it. And this has been spoken about a lot in the Bitcoin space, that property comes with inherent problems because although it's used as a store of wealth, there is an inherent yield as well. But you've got to deal with maintenance, overheads, taxes, accountants, regulation and all the stuff that comes with it. Whereas Bitcoin is buy, hold, don't. You don't have to do anything else. It's off the network. And Eric Trump talks about it in this video. And that's someone who is obviously at the forefront of property development and is saying that he's trying to convince his dad and the family to diversify, hold Bitcoin and real estate, hold the two. One's a trading vehicle that keeps their business moving. The other one is the store of value. So interesting to go and listen to. What's not so interesting is talking about mandatory housing targets. So now we're going to segue into the government demands. I don't know if you guys are seeing this in your areas, but the council have definitely councils seem like they've changed their tune a bit in our area since the government yesterday came out of its new targets. Our planning consultant sent it to me this morning as an update, and you can see most of the towns up here around the northeast, it'll be the same in everyone's areas. There's, they're upping targets by like hundreds of units per small town and borough. Accumulation of thousands of these units across the region. And they're being hot on it with these councils to meet their demands. So I'll just go through this headline here so everyone's sort of aware. So the government demands immediate mandatory housing plans from councils to build 1.5 million homes, which is known to be their target for the next 5 years. Councils will have just 12 weeks to provide a building roadmap demanded by Westminster as Labour targets 370,000 homes each year. Any authorities that don't do so will have a plan forced upon them. So the plan forced upon them, I'm taking that as being their town plan. I don't know if you guys have got input on that, but I'm assuming they're saying, look, if you guys can't fucking sort it internally, government's going to come in and force the developments through on your behalf.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have local plans where the councils take the national planning framework and then sort of build out their own plan. I think it's actually, good. I think it's pushing the councils into they're whoopsie, we didn't hit our housing target. Why do they necessarily at this certain point in care? And they obviously push for those housing targets, and some areas do actually materially hit them. But Dorian's actually pointed out before, episodes and episodes ago, that the council's just focusing their time on bigger applications because it's the same amount of time to approve a 200 unit site as it is a 2 unit site. So they're focusing on the larger stuff, but we actually need the pockets of brownfield SME development to really prop that table up. And we've used stats shared these stats before that I think it was in 2014 we were, as SME developers, we were delivering almost half of the housing allocation in the UK. Now we're down to like 19%. That margin of 20% of what we're now not delivering is probably enough to get us on the right track to deliver the houses that we need to be delivering. And like we talked with obviously John, who was on a few weeks ago, from a planning perspective, the national planning framework isn't actually also bad. It's just getting it actually down into the ground and implemented. It's like theory is there, execution is not. And we've talked time and time again about the public sector and how they're terrible implementation and execution. If planning was run like HMRC, it would be such a more seamless process, but it's not. It's so, like you said, leaky bucket syndrome. But Dorian, it'll be good to get your views from a perspective of mandatory housing coming in.
Yeah, well, I think like if you just we're still a plan-led system, so which we are now. It's just the councils have been late on them, and there's really been no accountability for it, as said. And then there's the housing kind of targets, which also is very relaxed if you don't hit them. And in Wales, this is in England, obviously announcement, not a Wales announcement, but Wales are definitely watching on with intent, and so are Scotland. Is Wales? We removed what's called TAN 1, our the housing 5-year housing supply requirement. We removed that because we weren't really hitting it, and it was causing developers to submit applications, and they were being weighted through appeal, and new applications outside the plan were getting consented, and they removed it because they wanted the system to remain a plan-led system, which only works if those plans are up to date and they account for the sufficient amount of new housing. And if that doesn't happen, which hasn't been happening, you end up in a terrible cycle of no new housing can come forward, and they're just late and they're not getting reprimanded by it, so to speak. So I think what it's doing is not really changing fundamentally the system, other than the potential grey belt issue. It's just really trying to enforce what's already there effectively, and they're saying, if you in this time bring in consequences, if you don't hit, if you
Yeah.
don't get up to speed, then we will do something about it. So
Yeah.
it's what's already there. It's just they've been operating with no consequences, so now the
Yeah.
consequences are effectively coming.
Yeah,
But
I think
what they're saying is, if when the sites get allocated within the local plan, they're also trying to make it where it's very hard for them to be refused. Then obviously there's still going to be considerations, but that's the next stage. Is you could get a plan in place, but if those sites are full of constraints that at the moment in the current system can result them not coming forward. Like, for example, we've genuinely got allocated housing sites right now in the planning system that are stuck, that are being objected by certain consultees, like on ecology grounds, for example, even though it's an allocated site. And at the moment, the allocation and priority isn't taking like priority other than of some of the objections. So the objections are waiting. So that's going to be the thing, is if they're going to rush now to get sites in the plan, but if those sites, this is the argument now from planning consultants as well, if those sites haven't been carefully considered for constraints, what happens when it goes through the planning system? And Angela Rayner touched on this, about if it's allocated, they're gonna strip out kind of the barriers to then get consent. That's going to be really the real interesting detail, how that's possible, really, in my opinion.
Interestingly, just taking this from a perspective of, we've just discussed obviously national framework and mandatory. One thing I just wanted to point out, I actually, the one thing I don't like about the mandatory element is it seems like you're working against the council, and that's always the way. Like if you chuck a permitted development application at a council, they're immediately working against you. You're not collaboratively working for the housing in the area, because they feel that you've kind of done the dirty, and it's like, we're going to do this anyway, so you've just got to catch up and sign it off. Whereas I think we should be pushing for a much more collaborative approach to planning, because then the councils feel like they're actually contributing to the local design. And another thing I was going to point out is the fundamentals of the theory is all in place. Where we actually need more action is getting the people bums on seats that can actually deal with the planning, because we've got a building in South London, social housing building, and the councils have got like a waiting list of like 3,000 people that can move in. They then haven't got the resource to actually fill the building, so we've got an empty building, and it's been empty for months. So it's all well and good having the theory in place of supported housing or planning or getting planning consents, but if you haven't got the trained people on the ground to implement, you're winning a losing battle.
Yeah. Well, planning will always takes us down fucking rabbit holes, doesn't it? 'Cause just if you're a developer, it's got so many scars in your mind that you can't help but just unravel like a litany of issues. Like I think all of us today at some point probably dealt with some sort of planning thing. I just dealt with a bat ecology survey. There's just always some kind of planning shit you're dealing with.
2 years.
But anyway,
2 years it's taken to get this site to contract. I've just signed it today, and because we're in mid-December, they want to start it in January, and I'm like, no, I want to start this tomorrow. 2 years it's taken to get the consent of this site. You know what I mean? It's and now we've got consent. You look back and like, there's no reason why that should have taken 2 years. Zero, nada, zilch.
Nit nouch. But yeah, we'll finish this article from Sky, just so people understand where the government's coming from. So the government is now holding accountable councils because they've got a political issue. Obviously, Starmer's not doing well in the polls. The favourability of Labour is going downhill. So they're trying to do something. And it's kind of working well for developers, because I've definitely seen it in our local council over the last week, where we've had a bit of a contentious change of mood from the council, who were in support of a scheme. Then they're like, oh, actually, I think we're gonna reject this scheme now based on amenity and character, which is just mental. I'm not going to divulge it, but now they've changed their tune completely since this, and they're like, oh, actually, and speaking to the planning consultant, and it's gone to the head of planning and stuff, and I think the head of planning is obviously feeling the pressure and going, look, we got to deliver units, like we can't be seen to do this, go to appeal based on character amenity. It just seems silly. So hopefully good news for developers. And just to follow on from this article, it says, and it will today, so the MPPF will today release its latest version of the National Planning Policy Framework, setting out the government's home building plans. And then Starmer himself said, we're taking immediate action to make the dream of home ownership a reality through delivering 1.5 million homes by the next parliament and rebuilding Britain to deliver for working people. Well, you shouldn't have upped our taxes, but anyway. And then under the MPPF, councils will have just 12 weeks to commit to a timetable for providing new homes in their areas. And if they fail to do so, ministers will not hesitate to impose a plan upon them, the government has said. So after less than a third of local authorities have accepted a plan in the past 5 years, which is touching on what Dorian and Jack have both just said there, where councils just sort of sat on their arse and not push things through the way they're meant to, and now the government are going to hold them accountable because the government have political favourability on the back end of delivering for housing. So there's now a lot more pressure on getting planning sorted. So hopefully good news for all of us. Now, there is another section here. A friend of ours sent in a group chat an update to the new MPPF standards that are coming out to do with committee changes. I'm not going to bother going through this, but it's on the screen. Anyone who's watching, you can have a read of it. It's just about streamlining committees from larger committees, making them smaller, restricting ward councillors from voting within their areas, setting up smaller, more focused committees, and just trying to streamline the process. But there's going to be new MPPF updates when they come out. And what we'll do is get John McDermott back on to do a proper deep dive on this stuff instead of just going over the high level bits here. But anyway, that is planning. And can I just touch on one thing with you two, for planning? So, and because I was speaking to Robbie again last night about this and Sonny, they were kind of just asking, like, why is planning sort of got to this position? And what do you guys think? Like, what is planning meant to actually solve? Like, why do we even have planning? And I think it's a great thing that we have it. It's very important that we have a planning system. But fundamentally, what is planning trying to do? And my understanding is this, just thinking from first principles, we have local democracies and people who have vested interests and are stakeholders within given areas. And those people have to have a say in further developments that might happen in their immediate vicinity, because otherwise we can't create a robust economy where there's trust and things like that, and people feel like they could build a house somewhere, then suddenly a concrete tower block goes up next door, devalues their asset and stuff like that. Then there's just the amenity part of it. So there's a local democracy to appease. And then there's regulatory standards that have to be upheld. Things like you need a window for a bedroom, or room standards, and a litany of other things that we can all agree on. There are sensible standards that we should uphold. And then it's meeting those standards, the ambitions of developers and housing targets, and trying to then have a conversation with local democracy so that we can actually make a decision.
So there's something in Wales called the Pattern Book, which they've been working on for a long time and a while, and ultimately what it is approved house types, approved designs, pre-approved designs, etc., which is fine. But realistically, though, the amount of schemes that we've had issues with that actually have objections on their layout, or even is not really high at all. We always resolve that quite easily. There's been issues with appearance, definitely, because it's got to be in keeping with local area, and then that's down to subjectivity, and you can't really put a pattern book in for that, so that's still going to be potentially an issue. But the main concerns and issues of not getting development really come from, in my opinion, it's those subjective policies over actually like ecology, like
amenity, character, bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, like we have a policy in Wales, for example, that says for social housing, then you need a minimum 40 square meter garden. However, we've just gone through a planning application now, and then the officers kicked back and said the garden isn't big enough. Yet we're hitting the 40 square meter minimum requirement that's set in a different standard. So you're like, which one's correct? And that's the issue. So I guess if you were to like create a checklist, so to speak, a box tick, as long as you hit these minimum criterias, then you're fine. It's okay. It's just those other, it's like highways. The policies out there. There's two conflicting policies. One is about more sustainable transport and less cars, and then the other one is that you need one car per bedroom up to 3. and it seems like they just decide when to apply. You
Mm.
know, they kind of just, it's up to them when they apply. Just what's it called? Betterment to that, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, yeah.
you can never bank on it, so to speak, that they're gonna drop it from 3 cars required for this unit down to
Mm.
1. And that's also a big issue.
Yeah, it just seems that we've just gone so far away from something that should be so simple. Like you have standards, you have people with ambitions in an area, you have a local democracy and local stakeholders and people that need to be consulted in that process. And I just don't see why that can't be much simpler than it has been made. And it's like it needs to be boiled back down to basics again and then built back up afresh because there's just too many strings and arms off of these regulations and other stakeholders now that you just can't rein it back in. I just don't see how they're going to get it into.
What I think they're
Don't see how they
missing,
do it.
yeah, what I think they're missing as well is, like, when you have an application in, it goes to a planning officer, which then sends it out to consultees and all that, and they have a time frame on it. What seems to be missing is you can get stuck in this kind of loop. The delays come from getting stuck in some form of loop, and the loop is that a consultee is disagreeing or the plan officer is disagreeing. Someone's disagreeing, and it typically ends up being on something quite subjective. Because if there's a clear policy breach of policy, it's very easy to everybody to understand that, and it just can't go ahead. It's the subjectiveness. But what happens is you get stuck in this loop, and it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth for what could be months. What they don't have internally is like this system that captures stuck applications or stored applications when it goes past a certain amount of weeks, where it become that goes to a different kind of roundtable internally now, where some form of like project manager is like, what's the issue? Why
Yeah.
is that application still outstanding? Like, what's the problem? Make a decision, move on.
Yeah. It's like if you go for debt lending on a site, the debt lender will have credit reviews. So they'll take in all the applications Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then every week everyone gets around the table. They look at every deal and they go, yes, no, need to lower the leverage, blah blah blah, blah, and just box it all off in one meeting. If they're planning and did that, it would be a huge benefit.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, there's.
And then, but if it comes back down to, sorry, the guest we had on before was John McDermott, wasn't it? And he said, planning officers at the moment, they have like over 100 cases on their desk. So I don't think they can take all their cases through to a meeting like that. But it's the ones that are clearly stalling, the ones that they can't, there's some form of decision that can't be made that's relatively subjective. And it requires somebody with senior level to just say, this is the decision. This is what you're doing.
I think there's an interesting takeaway from that conversation with John. And for anyone listening who's not listened to our podcast episode with John McDermott on planning, make sure you go watch it because that's from someone who was a qualified town planner and it still is practicing planning consultation. Really interesting talk. And one of the biggest things he said was historically, so going back into the 20th century, planners were incentivized based on their successes. Now they are penalized based on their failures. And that incentive change means no one really wants to do anything remotely rebellious or remotely stepping outside of their box because they actually get penalized for it. And that incentive switch is so big. And John says it better than I will. So it's worth listening to that episode. And you can see the structural changes that have caused this ossification of planning decisions, which is they need to change. They absolutely need to change incentives. But anyway, planning, we could just go on forever. Instead, let's go on to failures and naivety. Stuff we talk about a bit on this podcast, but I just think there's such an endless topic that it's always good for us just to hash out potential learning lessons for anyone listening, catering for our audience who may be out there taking on new projects or looking to get into property, or they're on big projects at the moment and need to make key and core decisions. And being a property developer, sometimes, most of the time, you're armed with information. Hopefully you've used good people, and those good people will give you good information, whether it's your planning consultant, your architect, your contractor, whoever. They give you they give you information, but you need to make a core decision, and either a commercial decision that could affect the scheme and its financials, or a design-led decision, something preferential or whatever. Now, all those decisions have consequences, and usually there's this kind of like allure of optimism around a lot of decision making in property development, because without that, you can just cynically kill every decision you might ever make. So I just wanted to see if we could open up some dialogue between us on optimism and the consequences of naivety in property development when you're either going into a project or coming into the sector. And if you guys have got any good stories or good nuggets we could hash out.
Sure, do you want to go first?
Sorry, I'm going to be completely honest with you. As you was talking there,
no,
I didn't shut off. I'm currently closing a deal, which something came in on it. So
I could see him tapping away. He was just tapping away whilst I was talking.
I mean, this is probably why we record in the mornings and not on a Friday. I've literally just exchanged on a building that we were buying, and we're also just about to sell a house as well. So today is that was my lawyer on the phone now saying the buyer's being an absolute Burke.
What does that mean? Is that like a Henley saying?
Henley saying Burke. Bastard.
Oh, you look like you're from Berkshire.
He's being a tad difficult.
Go on, Jack. Give us your failures.
Yeah, so one lesson that I learned really early on, which was quite painful, is I put too much confidence in consultants and professionals. And when let's say you bring together, one phrase I don't really like is like power team. So when you bring your professionals in and they're all like operating on a planning application, they don't give a monkeys to some degree, bad ones specifically, if you get the consent or not. And I very painfully learnt that where we did a planning application, cost me about 35-40 grand. I was on my own, so I self-funded it all, buying a building subject to planning. It failed at planning, and I was 35-40 grand out.
Meet myself. Who do you look to in that failure point? Normally you'd look to... Oh, can you hear me?
Sorry, Jack. I'm muted as well.
Your mic changed, Jack, from your headphones to...
Technicalities.
Yeah. I thought that was me. I was kind of spacing out then. I didn't know what was happening, you know. Just like...
It's gone fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Technical difficulties on the product part. Yeah, there you go. You're back.
Yeah.
Oh wait. Yeah.
So yeah, what I was saying. So anyway, failed planning application. Where do you look? And I sort of turned to the architect. It obviously wasn't Ben at this time. This was before Ben and I started working together. And I was like, well, what do we do now? And he was like, well, you failed at planning. And I felt that lack of care really pissed me off. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, it didn't even seem like he was bothered. Just not actually.
Tap on the shoulder. Better luck next time, mate.
Almost like it was my fault. And I was like, cool, okay, well, you're not going to take any responsibility for that. And then I looked to the planning consultant, kind of did the same thing to gauge it. And anyway, same issue. So one question I love asking our consultants is, would you put your own money on the line with this? And get them to actually say it, yes, because then I can fucking pull them up towards the end, and they work a little bit harder on it towards the end. So that's one. Like I naively put a lot of faith, and I've just thought that other people would care as much as I did about something, even though it's my project, where it was very cynical and clean. Like they didn't really care. So that's definitely a learning, and a painful learning, because it's super painful, because I just pulled from the transaction. It was converting a house into 4 flats, didn't go ahead and buy it, was out of legal costs, planning costs, moved on, which was really, really painful. So that's one learning. Another naivety that I see. Sorry, were you going to say you can relate?
I was just I completely echo that. Yeah, planning consultants and architects. If you're going into stuff, you've got to have, just to kind of elaborate on that for anyone starting out who might be engaging with these kind of people for the first time. They'll obviously talk a good game and they'll sound like they know what they're talking about. They might not even be that good, but to you, they'll sound like they're really good, and they will. They're there to earn fees for their hours, and they're not necessarily there to care about the downside of you not getting planning. The good ones will care, but obviously it's not their responsibility. They've not got skin in the game. So you've got to try and understand sensibly, like, is this person pushing this through because they actually think it's going to work, or because it's a good idea, or are they doing it because it's another job for them, it's more fees? And you kind of, the best way to work around that is try and get a referral for particularly a planning consultant, and ideally an architect. Get a referral of someone who's used them successfully before, or look at the planning portal for what planning consultants and architects have had successful plans similar to the nature of your scheme approved. And that's kind of like a database, a library you can go and look at to acquire that sort of talent, because otherwise they'll talk rings around you and you'll think, oh yeah, sweet, I'll go through 18 apartments, no problem, it'll be fine. Architect said it's fine, planning consultant said it's fine. You've paid them 20 grand and then you get no support from the planners. So just wanted to elaborate on that. But sorry, Jack, go
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. And then another learning, and this is actually more me speaking to other people and other people that are analysing projects, is your Excel sheet needs to be the perfect balance of optimism and realism. And time and time and see it again where people have too optimistically run a spreadsheet, and I'm like, your GDV's punchy, your build cost is very, very low, and all of it could be achievable, granted. But the difference between actually what you want to put as and that markup with like decreasing the build, decreasing the GDV and increasing the build might be the deal not actually falling in the right place. So that's another key one. But actually, that's actually maybe I was naive and did it myself. I don't know. Obviously, it's difficult to go look at
I've definitely
yourself
done that
10 years ago through the lens, but now, you know, we're so hot on it. I actually look at what are the problems with this scheme rather than what the benefits, and you know, it doesn't excite me as the same way it does, because you just look at it like, I've had this issue before, it was a pain in the arse, and you just get so like put off by not analysing the risks out of any particular project.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely been there and looked at an Excel sheet and gone, if we can get it done for that, oh, this is a good scheme. And then in hindsight, just going, mate, you got 4 floors that are half broken. The bays are slipping down the building. You got joists in the loft that just need to be replaced. If you don't account for those costs of that Excel sheet, then suddenly the scheme looks quite different. We did the build, cost us 30 grand more. Lo and behold, the Excel sheet was wrong. But there you go.
Yeah.
Go on, D. Any lessons?
I mean, to be fair, it's probably the number one thing you would say to any new developer. There's two things I would always say to any new developer coming in is, number one, get your personal cash flow resolved. And try if you can get your personal cash flow resolved without it being related to your development business, even though you'd still be loading in fees anyway, you're going to set yourself up for a much easier ride. Basically, if you can resolve that personal cash flow. You know, development's great, but it's lumpy, it's slow, there's a lot of uncontrollables. We've just talked about the whole planning system, that there's whole planning reform. So whenever you're going into something with a reform going on and a crisis going on, it's probably going to be unpredictable, which is true. So taking that away, that would really help developers. And I didn't do that enough when I started my business. So in terms of a lesson, I thought you could get permissions much faster, and I thought I could load projects with fees and cash flow very quickly. And then the opposite actually happens. Projects take a lot longer. We're on average, we don't have PD really in Wales, and it's all new build schemes, and we're forward sales, so there's lead time. But on average, it takes us about 21 months from start to finish to get on site. Then only we're on site. And then also, when a project starts going wrong, the first person to lose their cash flow fee is you as the developer, because if you've, which comes back to the second issue, which is incorrect appraisals and estimates, and it is like the number one thing that developers, especially in the early days, fail on, and pretty much all aspiring developers I've spoken to, whenever they've got their information wrong, it's been loaded, or like they is incorrect. The GDVs are optimistic sometimes, but more importantly, the build costs are fucking way off or low. You know, it's like they're looking at a site and it's flat, and like, yeah, it's £2,000 a square meter, or most people, when I was like 59, trying to get it lower. And then you look at a site like a cliff, yeah, it's £2,000 a square meter. There's no way a site that's flat or a site that's sloping is going to be the same build cost. You know, it's just something as simple as that.
Which I think D comes down to knowing your phases of works as well, doesn't it? Because once you're out the ground on the slope and you've done those enabling works, you've got your foundations in, you're up to DPC, the costs probably are not too dissimilar to building out the ground on the flat, but it's knowing where the cost implications are.
If it's the same spec, yeah. But equally, if you're looking to do a GD, if you're looking to sell a house at 750 grand, it's going to be a different spec than doing one for 300 grand, more than likely. You know, if you're going to be doing a build to rent scheme, it's going to be a different spec than it is for build to sell, or bits like that. Really is. But I think the key thing I would say as a lesson, what I did, which I wouldn't do again in hindsight, I would focus more on building recurring income and cash flow away from the development business inside. I would get that sorted, and then just that's that. Second thing I would do is I would spend a lot of time, as we've discussed before, building fundamental knowledge in the sector and building my network. And I would be getting as much comfort as I could on build cost. However you do that, work with, being part of a community, having a mentor, having someone who's clearly been there and done that, work JVing with a contractor, lots of different ways, but really, really trying to nail down those costs of delivery. And and then I would not rush. The other big thing is do a deal first. Just do one before trying to blow up and scale and do 10, because you make most of your mistakes in the first 1, 2, and 3 jobs. And you don't want to sign. It's actually quite easy, without rambling, it is quite easy to secure a deal, right? But it could be the wrong deal, which most of the time, it would be. You can secure a 7-figure deal and raise investment, because investors, unfortunately, you can raise money with incorrect numbers on your investor proposal. And then you've locked yourself in for an 18 to 24 month absolute shit show. And that's the bit you really don't want to be doing. Just start slow, sort your cash flow out, nail your costs, prove it once, then you can scale from there.
And where do you think, when it comes to that naivety in appraisals, and I know all the things that went wrong for me, just thinking back on those first deals where you get an Excel sheet out, you might have built it yourself, you might have gotten a template of someone else, but where is it in the appraisal? Like, where are those key pitfalls? Because obviously GDV is one thing, build costs one thing, purchase price is one thing. There's 3 key variables there, but there's also other things that can go wrong. So how can someone who's maybe being naive, how can they, rather than being naive, just be able to actually back themselves with facts, with evidence, and be confident in their conviction, rather than just, I hope it's like 130. There was one around that area that sold for 130, but like, really, if it's average, it's probably going to be like 110. Like, what are those things that need to be done to make sure that your evidence on that Excel sheet that's going to dictate the financial performance of this project is actually backed up by the right evidence? Do you know what I mean? Because obviously there's historic land data and things like that you can use, but
like every stage of the development process, you've got to look to see how you can de-risk it as well. So when you look to secure the land, if it doesn't have permission, for example, buying it unconditionally is higher risk. So try to just tie it up instead. As Jack's discussed before, he pays very low deposits to secure a site. Always aiming to back to back. Do the same. Get an option agreement instead and try to get it for as low as £1 fee. If you can do that, then great. Or at least in a conditional contract. If you want to do a scheme of PD or want to do a scheme of full planning, make it conditional. So if it goes wrong, you can back out. You'll still lose some money, but it'll be small soft cost. There's always going to be that risk there. That's how you de-risk the land. And then don't forget the time scale as well. Don't just go in there if you're going to negotiate, don't agree a 3-month conditional contract. Get as long as you can. Go for no. There's a great book. Anyone listening to this, read it. It's called Go for No. It's a small book, and all it does is just reaffirms in your mind, if you're not hearing no's in your negotiation, you're not pushing enough for the terms that you really want. If you go do a negotiation, it's just yes, 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 yes. It can happen, and it is quite rare. But don't be afraid of no. You're not going to lose the entire deal just because they've said no on one point. Like that, that's the people's fear. It isn't going to happen. And you can get out of that fear again by having a pipeline. So don't forget to pipeline, have lots of leads coming in so you're not motivated to do the deal you're working on. Second thing, sorry, once you guys pass land, I'm not trying to syrup all the points here Jack's probably got, and you've got tons of them, but that's land. When you get into the build, there's ways to de-risk the build, either JV with a reputable builder or main contract your first deal out with getting a cost consultant to really help you, and they're reputable and get performance bonds and solvency cover, all that sort of stuff. It'd be vetted by your finance company as well. And it's just the key things, really. When you go raise
Can
finance,
I add one on the build? Just add one on the construction whilst you're on that, because Jack said, I can't remember if you said it on this podcast, Jack, or if it was a few years ago you told me. I think it was when we had one of the TDC meetings. But you said in your deals, you add 20% cash requirement for the actual construction costs. And ever since you said it, all of our deals are appraised with a 20% contribution of cash, regardless of minimum cash requirements for what the Excel sheet says. We always build in that 20% buffer on the construction costs outside of a 10% contingency. So there's a 10% contingency baked in anyway. But what we're saying, based on your insights, Jack, is that 20% allowance is another cash cushion if you so need it, and can just de-lever and help to start the site if you find problems in the financing. And I think it's just so important. Any deal, you should be baking in that 20% provision, because ever since we've done it, it's been utilized. That cash cushion, we've used some of it. And if we didn't have that in there and went lean on what the Excel sheet said was the minimum capital, the maximum capital requirements, we'd have been short on cash. So that's another thing in there you could do on your build cost to make sure that you've got a layer of contingency in cash that you have, rather than what you're trying to withdraw from the bank. Sorry, D, go on.
No, look, I can go on and on and on. It's probably, if Jack's ready, he can jump
Go on,
in.
Jack,
and
hit us with some gold.
Give his 50p gold coin.
You're on mute though. Oh no,
Yeah,
your mic's just broken. So 0 gold coming out of your mouth, mate.
Or he's on the phone to someone else and he can't actually contribute.
Technical difficulties.
I think you must have pulled out your wire again, Jack. Did you? It's probably because you're leaning back on your chair, like you're driving in a
chin wagging. He's doing deals. He's not thinking, you know.
with his cap on, it's like a boy racer at Tesco car park.
Fucking hell. You back?
It's funny because we can rip into him and he can't come back.
He can't say shit.
So still can't hear you, mate.
Still can't hear you.
You must have done something to your wire.
Hear me now?
There we go. He's back.
There's that beautiful voice.
Actually quite croaky at the moment because I got the same flu as Ryan. But yeah, generally, obviously, we can spend hours on a spreadsheet. Maybe if you do want to delve deeper into a spreadsheet deep dive, there might be something coming in the near future. One thing, the sort of more important things that I always say focus on a spreadsheet is volume. The more you do, the better you get. That's just fact. You know, that's your own verification internally. A lot of people are like, oh my God, Jack, how do you run through a spreadsheet in 3 minutes and analyze a deal that you then carry on the way through? It's because I've looked at over 2,000 deals in my lifetime, so it just becomes easier, quicker. You apply the same rules across the spreadsheets, and when I started out I was shit, and now I'm getting a little bit better. So every time you're doing it, you're improving. Continuous improvement. So if you build a formula or a spreadsheet, like for an example, we were bidding on an office building where we were phasing out the tenants, then we built a little template and then we saved it onto our overall template. So now we can tap into that over and over again if we need to. So build into like routinely things that might become useful. I always, generally speaking, there's only 3 things that should and can really change on a spreadsheet, and that is the purchase price, the build cost, and the GDV. Everything else should almost be formulated. Finance costs are normally pretty consistent. Timeframes are obviously editable, and then that depicts the finance costs. Professional fees are normally a percentage of the construction. Stamp duty is a percentage of the purchase price. Legal fees are typically the same. So focus on those 3 areas to drive down into the detail of the deal. Out of those 3, the most important one is the gross development value, because it's the biggest value on the page. So if you're 10% out, the swing of that is going to have a bigger impact than if you're 10% out on your build costs. So that is the most important one to narrow down and get fine-tuned. Build cost is quite difficult if you're not from a construction background, and all I would say is verify your spreadsheet with someone else that's doing it or has done it or is building. So for an example, a lot of my mentees like tag me in their spreadsheets and go, can you cast your eyes over this? If I've done a spreadsheet, I may tag Ben or Aaron in it in my team to get a third-party verification. And then another thing we do with our spreadsheet, which people absolutely love, is we have our stress test calculator, which is on top of the cash flow point Ryan meant. So it's 20% of the build cost comes in as cash, and then it's drawn down in arrears by the bank, but then you've technically over-raised to at 20% on that build. But what we also do to stress test our projects is we run a scenario. If the GDV were to decrease by 10%, if the build were to go up 10% on top of the 10% contingency, so that's 20, well, we actually have 15, so 25%. And if the project takes 50% longer than we had anticipated, what does the profit margin look like? And if it still makes a profit, that analyze, like checks the depth of the risk on the scheme for us. So yeah, get out there, analyze as much as you can, verify it with other people, and just keep building that spreadsheet out to make it adaptable and workable for you and your business. But our spreadsheet, I would be amazed if it hasn't had thousands of hours of improvements over the 10 years that we've been sort of building it out and operating on it.
Yeah, I'd add another one as well, just different from anything we've said so far. And it's funny, the longer you're in property development, the more the shiny penny wears off. But at the start, it's ripe. And I don't know if you guys had the same thing. I know Dorian looks at a beautiful old listed building and just thinks about how you can knock it down and build something fucking new there. But I definitely had the issue at the start where if I saw buildings, I was like, oh, that'd be so beautiful. Like once it's done, what a great asset to own. It'd be sick in that
when I
building.
hear developers start talking like that, and they've never done a development before, I know straight away they're in for a hard time.
Yeah. And it's one of the guiltiest things, I think. I mean, I definitely had this problem, and it got shook out of me pretty quick at the start. I'm not sure if you guys had the same thing, but you just want to own the property. You like the property for some emotional reason, or you just like the idea of owning that specific site, and that forces you to then look at your appraisal with a bias lens rather than just what do the numbers say. You start to go, I think it would be worth more because it's a nice building. It's probably got a bit more of a premium than that building there, even though that's a comparable. All of those things basically set you on a garden path to using up all your contingency and probably losing
Emotions
some money.
are expensive.
Very expensive. And owning buildings is a great thing, but only if they make financial sense. So never make stupid decisions just because you want to own that specific building, unless you're so rich that you don't care about your
We've
financial
seen that
returns.
firsthand. Other developers they've bought stuff that not even the most seasoned developers would attempt to build. Things that have stopped being in construction 400 years ago, but they decided to buy them and for the first development and tackle it. I'm thinking to myself, that is fucking nuts. But and obviously, as of today, they're still undeveloped, which is which was obvious. But it's hard because I tell you why that happens is the sector in general. And I'm not using this as a rant of the education sector. I genuinely believe there's a need for education in the space, like 100%, because it's such a risky thing. The problem is sometimes you can get information from a potential trainer or influencer or something who said something and made it seem so easy, so believable that when it isn't. I ran a course once. It was where the intention was to actually upsell for a training thing. And I was so honest with the sector, so honest with our deals and how it actually works if you want to do it. No
one wants to do it.
I actually had people coming up to me afterwards saying, "Do you know what? I really wanted to be a developer, but after coming in today, you've realised I don't want to do it. So thank you." I unsold them. I kind of thought to myself, I probably laid it on a bit too thick there.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely there's nuances, isn't there? Because there's definitely strategies in property that are pretty frictionless, like pretty straightforward. But it all depends what returns you want and what your starting point is. If you've got a load of money and you just want to park some commercial assets, then you're not going to come too unstuck in property, but you're probably going to settle for 6, 8, maybe 10% returns if you're lucky. So just for anyone listening who thinks property development is a scary thing, like you could lose lots of money. Yes, that's true, but there's so many strategies that you can just by the nature of your strategy de-risk some of these downsides that we talk about. There are strategies that don't involve planning at all, and there are strategies that there's such low capital requirements that don't require any financing either. So there's things you can do, but ultimately you want to get into actual developments, then there's no getting around it. There's so much risk that ease is never a thing, but over time your nous just gets sharpened so much that you become that cog in the wheel that makes things easier for the people around you and the professionals you're working with, relaying the right information, knowing what you need to give to someone to make sure they're equipped to make a decision. Because at the start, you just expect the professionals around you to know stuff. And then a lot of the time, they don't actually really know, and they're kind of guessing as well because you don't know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and if even in development, that's the thing. You can build a really big business and get involved in big deals with relatively little, if not sometimes none of your own money. The issue with that is that any development deal, you're going to be tied into some form of PG. You're going to get tied in personally. So if it does go wrong, you will have a risk there. But the big risk in today's age is we're in a digital age. You're only ever a Google search away now from being found out, so to speak. So
Mm.
working with investors is the only way you're going to be able to do deals where you don't have to put money in, unless you're doing something similar to what we do, which is flipping contracts on and getting a direct build contract award. So obviously you don't need much investment for that. But if you did a deal, and so then if you do it wrong, your issue is you're running the risk of your investor, even though they're an equity investor, of losing money. And even if they've entered into an agreement with you as an equity investor, you still don't want that on your record at all, really, because it will, it's who wants to do that? No one ever wants to get into business to lose people money. Only sociopaths really are up for that, and so they can get fees out
Well,
along the way.
let's touch on that then. Let's touch, because that's another big naive thing for people when they're starting, and even just people who are a bit too bullish when it comes to other people's money, because it's a flaw in most industries. It's not just property. When you're raising or using other people's money, sometimes people think they can get away with not being as responsible because it's not their
Oh,
own cash.
sorry
But
to jump in again, but
go on.
this one takes the biscuit, as they say in Henley. Is
The bisque.
Jack was there as well. One of the things that there was a guy that once said before in front of a group of people that was like, they were talking about aggressive growth in risky deals they've never done before, raising money from private investors, and obviously people in the room experienced were like, that sounds really risky. You could end up going bust doing something like that. And the response was very much doesn't really matter. I'll just go to Dubai for 6 years, ride out, the bankruptcy thing. I'm thinking, wow, that's an attitude.
Yeah, there's definitely, and
Yeah,
it's a warning shot for. Sorry, Jake. It's just a warning shot for any investors out there listening as well. There are people in this space, plenty of them, who do not care when they're handling other people's money. I mean, there are fraudsters who will just take other people's money, but there are also people who look like they've got good intentions, but they don't have responsibility for other people's money.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I've actually, trust but verify is very, very important in this industry. You've got to build trust with people, and trust is something that's earned over years. But you need to verify that. But I've actually heard a bit of a horror story of a trading platform, and a lot of property people put their funds into it, and it, basically went pop, and all of the funds that they were making, was, disappeared. And it was a big Ponzi scheme essentially. And I know a lot of really sound-minded people that lost quite a lot of money in that particular exercise. And it seemed like everyone was going in because it was paid out monthly, so it was almost like very believable and real. And I almost went in myself. It was that convincing. But yeah, definitely spend as much time as you can verifying. I was actually on a call with our investor. I think it was yesterday. We're just agreeing a loan on we're refinancing a site with one unit left, and we're just using his cash to refinance it out. And we're sorting out security and first charge and stuff like that. And we were talking about repaying investors, and I said, look, I want to do 10 deals with you, not 2 deals with you. So it's actually impacting me more negatively if we don't see this through and pay you down. And I think having them and the investor see it from my side isn't I want to get this done and run away and not pick up phone calls and worry about the next deal. I said, look, you've got capital, I've got the resource, and we just want to keep growing that business and working with you over and over again. So the reputation of growth and building that trust is really important to us. But yeah, it makes me cringe when you see certain stereotypes on social media going, what you want to do is get OPM, other people's money. That's not our gig. We see it as a partnership, a shared partnership. We're collaborating with them.
That as well, Jack.
Yeah. And
I think
comment in the section, see if you can get my impression.
I think it's just to add to just for any investors listening as well, and it works the same for property developers, but this industry is so semantic and it's so nuanced that anyone with even just a remote bit of experience, but particularly if they're quite experienced in property, will walk rings around an investor and sell a deal, talk about its merits, hide the downsides. There's so many things that where a developer can easily lay or lead an investor astray on a deal, and it's just so important that you just get backup, get verification from someone else. Like Jack's introduced an investor to us once, and the investor straight away, their opinion of us was, well, Jack referred you, so obviously, like, I trust that you guys know what you're doing. And just having that, being able to be referred to the right people, or them at least having a social presence with proof, being able to speak to their previous clients. So new clients who come to us, they get to speak to 2 or 3 of our other clients just to verify that we are who we say we are, because you can't
Definitely,
verify
that's why,
through facts.
yeah. That's why next time when I go to Mibim, I'm going to get a big white shirt and have black writing on the back of it. Jack Jiggens knows me.
Invest with me, please.
Yeah,
Uh,
that should sort me right out.
Interestingly,
to
shall I
add.
share? Shall I share? Obviously, I saw Daniel Priestley speak last Saturday.
Oh yeah, how did it go?
Yeah, amazing. He's such a beast. He's really good. But it's just a relevant point that you touched on there, Ryan, about a verification of like a referral or an introduction is really key. And he's basically got these new metrics. Like before, it used to be 7 touch points is what you would need to be able to have a convertible invested sale. For an investment, that might be more, and it might be more time that you would need to spend with them. But Daniel Priestley works off a Google like actual framework of what Google did a mass research product where they were assessing what you need to close someone out basically as a trusted client. And it's not 7 points of contact anymore, because digital format is kind of ruining that and reshaping that space and model. But it's 7 hours of digested information. I said this to you the other day, Ryan, on the call yesterday. 11 touch points, so that's Instagram, Reels, whatever it may be, on different platforms. So 11 different engagements. So that might be an email. You might even see a photo on a billboard. That might be even when you're crossing the Severn Bridge to Cardiff, you see a big banner of Dorian, welcome to Wales.
Welcome to Wales.
Then the final point is 4 platforms, so that normally engage with you across the platform. So if they're subscribed to your YouTube channel and also on your Linky Dink and also on your Instagram, for an example, and those 3 metrics is normally when you've got a convertible client, but that can be heightened if there's a special occasion like an introduction that comes in, or like you go to witness some, like for an example, you take an investor for a day as golf. Those 4 hours are probably more valuable than them watching 4 hours of your YouTube content, because it's a special occasion. But it's you touched on it there. A referral is actually enhancing that special occasion and getting a third-party verification, almost like a witness, really. That's how law goes down in this world. If there's a witness, there's a witness. It's a third-party contact that can actually verify that information.
I've actually got a good quote on that. But ignore me because I can't find the quote.
Cool.
So.
I can share some other bit where you're finding that on Daniel Priestley.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, loved him. Actually managed to went to dinner with him on Friday, spent all day Saturday with him and all day Sunday with him, and it was really enjoyable just sort of picking his brains, seeing how he works. He's just super switched
What's
on
the
guy.
big change in your business you're going to do following that interaction? Like, what changes are you going to make, if any?
So I think the biggest change is one around marketing. And he has like a marketing model which is similar to the Simon Sinek with the why, but his view is you've got their current state, desired state, and the hurdle in between is where you make your money. And all you need to do is let them see that they can get to their desired state with you, and how you do that, and verify how you do that. And it's basically the communication and marketing. So that's one big change that we're implementing in our business, which we were from Goldman Sachs, actually, which I've now graduated, Dorian, you'll be pleased to know, 55-page business plan.
Congratulations.
So the why is really important. So for listeners out there, I love using my surveying company because that's actually a really, really good example. We used to market saying, we do surveys, we can do a drone survey, we can do a land survey, we can do a Matterport, we can do a measured building survey. And you're constantly feeding the audience with the product, which is the what, but you're not telling them the why. Our why is we save architects time. And that's it. It's got nothing to do with the survey. So their in is like, immediately, you're benefiting me, you're helping me, you're more cost effective, you're making my life easier, you're making my products better, and that is the why. So focusing on the why within your clientele. Another big change that I'm going to put in, and I kind of already sort of do it. So I've been tracking my time on Toggle to see where I allocate my time in different businesses per week, so I can sort of refine that and improve it. And one biggie that he just like completely slapped me in the face with, I always try and focus on, like Dorian talks on, like high value tasks, so strategy, people, cash flow, and execution. And I always try and focus on those high value tasks. So high value tasks, for example, is capital raising, is business strategy, is being on these ground up, podcasts. But you do get bogged down in the weeds. So what I'm now going to do is actually code my calendar to HVT, high value task, and LVT, and try and get rid of all my LVT within my calendar.
Nice.
And I think a compounding value of that is, so I code everything in my calendar already to the company, and all I've got to do is LVT or HVT in the calendar, and it will spit it out on my toggle report. So I'll go, what are you doing, Jack? You spend 80% on LVT and 20% on HVT this week. Turn that around.
Yeah. And that was such a valuable thing. If for anyone listening, I did a very, very similar exercise myself, where when I was tracking my time within, I did it for a couple of months in the end. I think Jack, me and you was talking about it at the time when I was doing it, and I was tracking it in 15-minute intervals, and I was categorizing what it was. And for me, I was looking to do strategic things, or as long as I was spending my time in strategic or financial related, because it was needed, or people development, or like strategic delivery, that was where I wanted to be. And anything outside of that was basically, it wasn't labeled as that, but it's a low value task effectively. And when I started it, my percentage was quite low. By the time I finished it, I changed my habits and my delegation, and I spent most of my time, and even today, I spend most of my time in those high level areas now, which is quite good. You still get some of the bits like I did a letter there to expedite land registry. I did that. It's not a strategic task at all. But the problem is, it's for me, it's a 20-second task, literally. For somebody else in my team that doesn't do this often, it could, and they might not have to do it again for forever. I'd have to spend 3 hours talking it through with them.
Yeah.
So because it's not a recurring task, there's no point me delegating. I may as well just do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's those tasks are tricky, though, aren't they? In property development, because they could be multifaceted. Like there could be varying amounts of those tasks that are one-off, so they're not frequent, but they take enough domain knowledge that teaching someone else can be kind of a bit of a ball ache. But what you can do is try and gen someone up. So I'm fortunate to have my little brothers who will join the business once they finish college next summer, and I'm going through a process at the moment where we take like a weekend evening or an afternoon or something, and I'm trying to teach them all the different parts of the business and property development, so that at some point that person could kind of mirror me and be able to take on those tasks. Because otherwise you become a bottleneck, don't you, where a critical thing gets stuck by you and your time allocation to be able to take on that one thing, which usually for me is around finance or planning permission. Those are like the two areas. Most other things can be delegated. But I just want to touch on two of your points there, Jack, just to help for the listeners as well on the why factor. So we, in our business, anyone who's at the forefront of dealing with clients, they know that we're not selling property development to people. That's not what our clients want. They want yield. So we sell a yield product. Our why is we get you yield. You give us money, and we don't give us money, but you invest money. We're the custodians, and we are selling you on yield. We get you yield back. The property is the vehicle, but it's yield, rather than, which kind of simplifies the conversation with a client or with an investor, particularly when you're doing it at the scale we are, where they're like smaller sums, but there's a lot of them. You don't want to get into the nuances of like all the property project life cycle, different things, and the colors of the bedrooms and all that shit that can come with it. It's just, look, it's simple. Follow our process and you'll get yield. And yields what you're here for. You want your money to go further. So sometimes simplifying that for your clients and then using that as an arbiter for how well suited your client is to you and your process can be quite an important thing to do. Because otherwise you might have a client who's not actually that bothered about yield. They want to build something pretty so they can show their friends or something like that. And they can be an absolute nightmare to deal with, because that will just kick your processes out of kilter. And then just one other thing on referrals. So one thing you can do with your 7 touch points that you spoke about there, that Google have done this study on, there's outliers you can use, and referrals is one of them. So a referral can bypass some of those touch points, but also just really good content and marketing, and lots of it. because if you put really good content out there, like a compelling piece on your business or a project you've done, then you're going to bypass those potential competitors who aren't doing that. So I think you can expedite that process just by putting out really good quality content. Just thought I'd add that in there. But sorry, Dorian, you were going to say something, I believe, before I cut you off.
I was just going to say, so for Jack, building on from the lesson you learned there, and anybody listening to this podcast will remember Jack saying that he's heavily involved in his refurbs, and because he's good at it, he likes it, he's done them so many times. What and do you class that as a strategic task, Jack, or are you going to drop it? What are you going to do now with that?
Yeah, eventually move away from it and just oversee. Do monthly meetings with we've someone that's going to be running that completely.
You're training Rob, though, aren't you? That's the plan.
Yeah, Rob's skilling up. He's actually just about to finish his first one that I've just sort of said that's yours now. Run it, and then I want to hire someone technical because neither me or Rob are technical, so it would be handy to have that skill set in the business.
Nice. And that's for just for the listeners as well. That's not for XP property. That's for Central Suites, isn't it?
Yeah, so we have 3 project managers already in XP Property that run all of our projects. But in Central Suites, we don't. We have an estate manager for the end of care, the lettings and management. But the project all the way up to that has always been me. It's easy. I know what I'm doing. I know how to manage contractors. The contractors get used to what we deliver, so they're easy to manage. But exactly like Dorian said, it's an LVT, low value task that someone technically could run the day to day of that. I'll be like, someone will come in for a big development, like 20 flat development, like we're picking which door handles, and I don't run that. I give it to the project manager and they run that. But then I'll get a phone call on a flip on a little 350, 400 grand house, and then I'm actually picking the, the furnishing items. So it's getting drawn down into the weeds. But one thing I was taught by a mentor once is that high value and low value task is really important to make sure you grow and scale your business. But you may have tasks that you do that you enjoy and you actually want to keep, like washing your car or running a project. You can also keep those low value tasks if you enjoy them. If they give you happiness, you don't have to, if you want to be a billionaire, that's probably not a good idea to, prune the hedges on all of your real estate. But if you want to run a fairly-ish big company, but enjoy your day to day, then you don't have to outsource everything. But obviously we're in growth mode. So
yeah. Well, let me just add one thing. It's just come to my mind, and I just want to add it to the thing that I spoke about a minute ago because it's a good example. Just to do with using content to expedite the sales process. So this morning, me and Matt, who runs all of our ad funnels and our all of that stuff, from the ads to the funnel, the copy, the kind of content we put in there, me and him work on those things. And we've noticed now we have the clients that come through that funnel are categorized as to whether they're in a hot position or they're in a nurturing phase. And what we've realized is, in the nurturing phase, generally, a lot of investors they're ready to go, but there's usually just a little thing that's sort of holding them back from pulling the trigger. So we're going to try and use content to expedite that. The way we're going to do it is, they've already had a good chat with Dad. So my dad does the investor calls and sort of introduces them to the business and what we do. We also have an SDR and Matt who will do some of the initial calls. So they've gone through, they've been qualified, they're the right people, they're thinking about it.
What's an SDR?
Sales development representative. Yeah. So SDR sales rep. So the SDR is there to, there might be someone who's inquired, but they've not followed up. So the SDR will go and give them a call and say, look, you should have a chat with Dad or with Hugh and go through ask any questions you have about the investment specifics. The SDR themselves might not be too genned up, but they're there to sort of be that sort of front face. And what we realized, we have a lot of, at the moment, I think we've got 35 clients, people who've got money, who've said they want to go, who fit our profile, they're qualified, but they're in the nurturing phase. So what we're going to do is use content to try and kick them out of that nurturing phase and into the hot lead basket, if you like. And the way we're going to do that is by me creating, I've got this is one of my tasks this weekend, to create this presentation that almost like a storyboard of the whole project life cycle and genning up the client on exactly how our business works. Exactly. Sorry, it froze then. I think Jack's froze.
No, I'm still here, am I?
Oh, no, you're here. Sorry, mate. So a presentation basically start to finish on how our business operates, what's in it for the client, where the payments are and things like that. Because obviously they get talked through this information, but it's different just having it in a nice sort of 10-15 minute segmented video that's done to a really high standard with animation and graphics to make it almost like an explainer video. And we'll use that to target with our nurturing leads, because the quality of that content, sometimes some of these nurturing leads are also looking at other developers in the market as well. And if we give them this compelling piece, we're going to stand out. We'll be a cut above the rest, and give them, hopefully kick them over those last few hurdles they have. So there's again like an example of using content, and I'll let you know how it goes. It might be something that helps us, push people over the line in a quicker fashion. But definitely a good idea. If you can use content to change something in your business, particularly when it comes to sales, I think it's a massive leverage. But anyway, enough to talk about that. Just back to the contractors, because this is definitely where naivety and pit developers starting out, this is where all your pitfalls are going to start. If you've managed to get through planning, well fucking done. If you've got through financing, well fucking done. But now you're in the realm of contractors, and contractors, I mean, a developer can talk rings around an investor, which is a risk for an investor, which is why trust's so important. A contractor will talk rings around anyone because it's so technical. And even if, someone like Jack, who's well genned up in construction, but there's contractors out there who will know a lot more than yourself on larger schemes or on certain things. And you need to build a nous to learn how to deal with contractors and sort of get past the spiel of what they're saying and understand like if they're being honest. So I think we should talk about some useful advice on how to vet contractors and how not to be naive and fall into their pockets and think of payment terms. And
I think the biggest thing the skill a developer builds up over time is the resourcefulness skill, which we talked about before. And really what you get, you always get these like flags. Like a developer's not meant to know everything, but the best ones are those that it triggers in their brain, something that they know, as Jack said before as well, trust but verify. So if you're on site, and it's different obviously for the likes of us three because we've all been involved in construction and we've done deals. So now what we're about to say feels easy, but when you're if we're on a very and I deal with really technical schemes on a daily basis now, and I have no idea, if it was left to me. But that's not the whole point. The point is I have people in the room and I'm asking them questions, and my questions come from a common sense point of view, and I don't mind asking what looks to be, a question. And if they start coming back to me with lots of jargon and lots of buzzwords and lots of, stuff like that, straight away I'll just call it out. I'm like, you can describe things very simply, and if they can't describe things simply, then chances are they're trying to bullshit you. And if that starts happening, I'll know in my brain straight away I need to get a second opinion here from someone else. And that's what I'll do. So I'm involved in really technical things, and I'll have those conversations. But if they start going, mumbo jumbo, trying to quote certain page 48 of reg book, whatever, I'm just like, we all know there's no need to do that. It's just, And I start saying stuff like, if we can build a tunnel from London to Paris under the sea, I'm pretty sure we can build this timber frame house without you having to explain like we're going to live on Mars type of thing. All I'm asking for is how you be putting the stairs in. That's all I'm asking. No need to.
Yeah, it's so fucking true. Like, and also just in full credit to contractors, they're in their world, acronyms, terminologies, that's just their language. That's how they have to speak, because they're dealing with, when you think about what a contract has to deal with, so many different kinds of materials and tools and bullshit. If they always said all the words and the details, it would get kind of difficult. So they abbreviate, they use acronyms. There's lingo that's different in the north than it is in the south, and in the west and the east. And so you've got to kind of allow a bit of that, but you should always say, dumb it down. Just say it as if you're speaking to a 3-year-old. What are you saying here? Like, what are you? Because if they can't do that, then absolutely what Dorian's saying, you'll catch a contractor out every time if you just get them to dumb it down and make it super simple. But they are from that world, so it's not like they're trying to bullshit you. They might just be talking as if they'd normally talk, but you just don't understand anything they're saying. But yeah, naivety with contractors and getting in bed with them. There's provisions you can have in there. Things like payment terms, not paying anything up front is a big one. depending on the nature of the
But
project.
sorry, one quick thing as well, and
Oh.
because we're in a new world now, and I've done this recently. I was in a meeting and we was talking about fire regulation, and fire regulation is very, it's sensitive. And this something technical was coming up. It was something simple, like the task was simple. It was like installing a vent. Yet there was a big hoo-ha about it, about the fire regs, and I'm thinking to myself, this is insane. So I was thinking to myself. So I said, like, explain the problem to me very simply. And I typed in ChatGPT as it was explaining. It just explained to me very simply. Typed it in, give us a solution. I said, why can't we just do this? As stupid as it, why can't we just do that? And it was like, well, you don't have this approval, you don't have that certificate. And then I was like, right, who gives us the approval? Who do we need to okay this with? Well, it'll be, the building control officer. Ultimately, has got to sign it off. I'm like, fine, bring them. Can you got this issue? Can you give us some advice on it? Yes, it's fine. We've got internal fire external experts, whatever. And that's just coming back down to a resourcefulness trait, challenging resourcefulness, keeping it simple, and obviously now leveraging technology at your assistance as well. You can get real time. Obviously, don't take it as gospel. And as you see there with the example, I didn't. You still got to go through the approvals, but your job and everyone's job around is come up with solutions, not just challenges. And if their only solution is for you to pay them more money, then they're probably trying to get you, So like, Mr. Contractor, what's the solution to all that mumbo jumbo? Well, the solution is you pay us 20% deposit up front, non-refundable, and we'll start when we feel like it. That's just the solution.
Yeah. But and you can use payment terms as a way to cover yourself, and the way you certify payments and value payments, and having a good clear breakdown at the start. All those things will help cover you for your lack of expertise in a sector. But definitely dumbing it down is probably the best advice you can have. Just get any professional, and architects the same as well. Just get them to dumb it down if you don't understand it, because there's no silly questions in property, because there's a lot of silly shit that you have to deal with. So you might as well add to the silliness and just ask simple question.
Yeah, we have quite a formal process. We do pre-qualification questionnaire and send it out to the contractors, and that's got everything like their balance sheet, their turnover, their staff, their projects coming up over the next few years, their resource to deliver our project, who's going to be allocated on the job, their accounts, their expertise, their skills, their qualifications, their insurance, their car insurance, so contractors all risk insurance, their PI cover. And by the time they've come back to us, we can actually get a bit of a flavour whether it's deliverable on paper for them, because what you don't want to be doing is if you were building a few houses and the build contract was £1 million and you get a contractor on that. So actually, prime example, my builder, who Richard, shout out to Big Rich, we've done so many projects together, it's in excess of 30 now. We bought a house 2 weeks ago, and I actually said to him, I don't think you can deliver this. I want to give it to you, but you won't deliver it quick enough. And he was like, you know what, fair enough, I agree. And that was it. It's even the best builder in the world that you've got such a strong relationship with, even might not be right for the right project. So capacity is obviously really, really key. And then Ryan, you mentioned payments. We actually do retention payments. So every payment that goes out is normally 5 to 8% retained, and then we send that back out post snag once everything's signed off.
I would hate you as a client. Hate retentions. Retentions are so nasty. Like they're very necessary, and definitely if you're out there and you're dealing with big projects and stuff, you need retentions in there. But retentions for a contractor, like, I've now felt the pains of them, and you're basically holding cash flow and profit in like
it's
an
your
account.
margin. It's your
It's your
margin,
margin getting held, and it can be many thousands of pounds or millions of pounds. So yeah, it can be a bit of ball ache. Another one as well that we've not really spoke about as much here, but it's like the specific design trades that you have to deal with. Like, I found structural engineers very difficult to rely on in the early days. We've got a really good one now, but finding a good structural engineer, because the cost implications of bad structural design can be like so big, they can blow out a scheme. Mostly on retrofits.
There's actually I'll have to dig it out. I heard him on a podcast. I heard him on Rod Turner's podcast. The Rodcast. He had a guy on there who's like runs a QS company. You like throw your bill of quants at him and the design, and including structural design, and he will make a margin if he can value engineer and save you money. Such a cool concept. So he's actually trying to do the opposite of what every other QS is trying to do and cover their arse. Really cool concept. But he does like free appraisals. you submit it all, and then he then gets instructed as the QS and structural engineer on the job. And it's huge. Like our basement scheme in London, which is 2 big old HMOs, we're converting to 9 luxury flats. We've propped the whole building up, and we've dug a retrospective basement. So honestly, the structure of this is very complicated, and it's way beyond me. It's obviously where Ben actually comes into his own, because his degree is in architecture engineering. But that complexity of the scheme, saving that much of a steel because it doesn't need to be that much longer, could save you £1,000. And even like redesigning things, and that's what they do, which is pretty cool.
And efficiency as well. Like the big thing with structural design is like, temporary works and the actual getting it done in a clean fashion. Like it could be you're putting on fish plates, or you're putting on a pad stone that needs to set for a day or whatever. There's just so many ways to, if you've got someone who knows what they're doing, they can arbitrage that time for you. And it might be that you're buying the same amount of material, but you're doing it a week quicker or 2 weeks quicker. Or in some cases, you can bypass the whole thing if an architect's also looking at that going, hang on, you can get another unit on this side of the building. So why get that expensive unit when there's this one over here? So having good designers on bigger scales is massive.
Yeah.
But engineers are just hard to find. I just remember we went through like 6 structural engineers. I just couldn't find one who just had good advice. You just know that even if you don't know the answers, you just know you've got someone incompetent in front of you.
Yeah. Also, over engineering is one we find all the time. Like the complexity of a beam that we put in our Wallingford site, it was like literally a cross section of a beam, an upright pillar fixed to a steel that's supporting a wall, and like the amount of fucking bolts and lateral movement prevention, and it literally turned into a piece of art by the end of it. Cost a fortune. And yeah, you've really, with structural engineers, you really have to challenge them and say, I actually prefer to normally go, give me 3 ideas that you have, and then I'll pick one for you to design, because what they design is then got to be built and bought and implemented by a builder, and that difference of those 3 options might be 2, 5, 10K.
Yeah, massive. Like because
the same result.
Because structural engineers covering their PI as well, so they're literally almost incentivized to over-engineer. And you just, especially on retrofits, where sometimes it could be hard for them to narrow in the quants of like bearing walls and bearing structures. And if they're a bit complacent, they'll just go, oh, I won't do all that calculation. I'll just give them a slightly bigger gallows bracket or a slightly bigger steel, whatever it is. So structural engineers, I think you'll find structural engineers much harder to find than architects. Architects are kind of abundant, and you can find them quite easy on planning portals and stuff. But finding a good structural engineer is like gold. Any other engineers? I mean, you've got SAP Calc guys as well who can, if they don't use enough now, so that can be a bit annoying, especially now with all the efficiency standards and shit. So finding someone who's good at appraising and finding solutions for thermal performance and efficiencies, that's important. M&E designer, fucking hell, M&E designers. Yeah, there's a big one.
Fucking silly money.
Silly money you'll spend. So M&E designers.
I've got a well funny story about M&E designers. I was working on this. This was back when I was a project manager. I was working on this big project where we were fitting out a big office where BBC had moved up to Manchester, and basically this office space had a atrium because it was all owned by, all leased by BBC. And what we were doing is we were splitting up into 7 offices, independent offices. So we glazed the atrium, but as a result, we had to have ventilation fans pumping air through all the floors so that it didn't build pressure points. And basically, we like week after week after week after week, we're having these design meetings, and the mechanical engineer was something like £600 for 20 minutes. He was so expensive. And we were literally coming up with ideas and ideas and ideas, not getting anywhere. And for an example, like some of these fans were located above a meeting room and it was too noisy, so we had to then relocate the meeting room. And we're messing around and round and round. But anyway, this guy claimed, like it was, using all the jargon in the world, claimed that it was the beast of the East and the best thing since sliced bread. We were in this big design meeting to finalise everything and do these acoustic tests. And basically, I was with the other project manager, and we're in a meeting with like 30 people, including the board of the people that were doing the £7.5 million fit out. And for some reason, he couldn't say fan speeds; he was saying span feeds. and I could not keep it in. I had to go for a walk.
Span
because-
feeds. Span feeds.
He was like, the span feeds.
Yeah, that's good.
That's like that meme that's going on in the beginning. In the beginning, you know that one?
In the beginning.
Yeah, in the beginning again.
That is good.
Oh, I love
But
that.
M&E Designers will absolutely rip you off if you can't find a good one. Like, we've managed to get quotes down from 25 grand to 5 grand. So like
Mega.
you can seriously get ripped off, especially if your architect refers them, because your architect's can refer his pals and probably has a kickback in it as well. So finding a good M&E designer,
Yeah, mega.
super difficult.
And value engineer. That's really important. Value engineer as well as get a good M&E and structure
Yeah.
engineer. Cool. Dodge, you got to go. You got to go for bingo.
I've got to go party.
How'd you get on with your deal? How'd you get on with your deal? Get your deal over the line?
How'd I get on with my deal? Signed it. It's just the issue is now trying to get it over the line before Christmas. Whenever this episode goes out, we've recorded this pre-Christmas, whereas at the minute there's a bit of pushback. They want to do it post-Christmas, and I just
Said no.
there's no real reason other than just because now Christmas is upon us. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I want to work. I literally met the EA. I took this off today, and he said, "All right, so you're going to start now in January?" I said, "No, I'll start tomorrow if we can." He said, "Oh, before Christmas." I said, "I'd have a digger on site Christmas Day if we was allowed."
Right, mate. What about you,
Merry
Jack?
boom! Christmas.
What about you, Jack? Get your deals over the line, mate?
Just had a message. Funds are on their way for the sale, which is exciting. It's just a little house that we're
So I
selling.
lend a tenner.
That has been an absolute minging deal. The buyer is selling a property that's part like share ownership with a housing association. Fucking
Yeah.
nightmare. So it's delayed it by about 3 months. We accepted the offer on the 7th of June, and we're now fucking December just to sell a house. Anyway, that one should exchange and complete today, and then the exchange of the purchase has also gone ahead, which is good. Quite a fun one as well, because I literally got sight of the deal 10 days ago, and we've exchanged and we're completing next Friday. So I didn't even know the deal existed a month ago, and we've turned it around,
Yeah, nice.
capital raised, buying it, and then we'll be on site in Jan.
Nice.
Excellent. Well, we've got fortunately we exchanged on the site this week as well for 18, but we have got at the minute we've got 5 sites that are currently consented that we've not sold. We've got a site of 26, a site of 43, 58, 7, and 20. And I really want to get them all sold because as a company we've got like 7 figures of capital tied up in them. They should have sold by now.
Mega.
So it's
We're the same. We're the same. We're like all out at the moment.
yeah. Anyway,
Balls
You
deep,
feel
baby,
poor when you
balls
look at your
deep.
bank account, but when you look at your balance sheet on the soft cash flow that's how it is, you go, oh, well, maybe got a bit of cash.
as long as
on
you've
it.
done a revaluation, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny that,
Lovely lads.
that is just the problem for all developers. Like, I'm in the same boat where it's just cash out in deals. Fucking ball like. But anyway, yeah, good episode. Nice one, gang. These episodes, by the way, for guys listening, they get released like I think we're 2 weeks ahead. So you'll get these in 2 weeks' time, by which point you'd have probably heard the news that we're releasing some sort of network type thing. And we will explain more about that on the next podcast when Stuart's here. So hopefully you've checked that out by now. If not, we'll explain next week. And big love. Thank you for listening. These podcasts are released every Thursday at 5:30 a.m. Spotify and YouTube. Please do subscribe and share it with anyone who you think may find it interesting in the property space. Anyway, big love.
Merry Christmas.
Ground up sound. Ooh, yeah.